walk me through a little bit about growing up in Brazil and really just wanting to come to the US and then eventually coming here. Just the whole journey of that. It's so foreign to me. I just want to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So Brazil is a very different country, and an extremely different culture from the American one. And there are a lot of things that vary in your daily life from living in the US to living in Brazil, more specifically São Paulo, which is where I was from. If you don't know, São Paulo has 20 around 22 million people. It's three times the size of New York. So it's a huge city, and huge metropolitan area, and there's a lot of things that entail being in a gigantic city in a, so to speak, third world country, in which there is not really a sense of security, and that brings a lot of cultural differences from the US. So, just as a rule of thumb, people in Sao Paulo, the vast majority have bulletproof cars, and they nobody walks on the street alone in general, and especially at night. If you're trying to go to any place, I mean, you usually either Uber or catch a ride with someone. Firstly, obviously, because it's a huge city, so it's kind of hard to travel from place to place, but it's also pretty dangerous. I've been robbed in Brazil, and almost all of my friends have had similar experiences with, um, just not feeling safe, having being stopped in the middle of the street in the middle of the night. I mean, my parents have both been robbed as well, and it's it's just a facet of life in São Paulo that is very present in the day to day. And what that entails is basically um, a life that is more centered around being inside, being indoors. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of things, a lot of cultural things that stem from this factor that end up making Brazilian culture so much different from American culture. And one of those things, for example, is just having an immense sense of, camaraderie and just being super open, super generous. If you meet any Brazilian, you immediately see how warm they are, how energetic, and it's amazing to grow up in a place like that, where anywhere you go, any place you are able to immediately create friends and just create lifelong bonds in the span of a couple of minutes. Um, but yeah, enough background. My my life in Brazil started off in a Jewish middle school. I have a Jewish upbringing, and it was very interesting to have this background. I grew up learning three languages: Portuguese, English, and Hebrew, as well as, constantly having to juggle between studying the Bible and obviously focusing on my academics. And when I was around, I'd say, I want to say like 14, 15, I switched schools. So I started I switched during ninth grade into an American school. And from there on, I was 100% focused on coming to the US. I knew that I wanted to go into a really good university. Brazil has some good colleges, but they don't even compare um, to the top colleges in the US. And COVID hit, and that was obviously horrible, but it also opened up a lot of possibilities for me, especially with the extra time that I had on my hands. And so I was able to just do work on a lot of projects and do what I wanted, learn what I wanted, and just develop myself with that extra time. And and yeah, here I am. Was able to get into Duke and come to the US. And Probably thinking of going back to Brazil one day, but not for the foreseeable future.
Hmm. That's quite the experience, I imagine, growing up in Brazil, like you said, completely different culture than the US. How was that transition, like, whenever you first came here to the US from Brazil, whenever you made it in over to Duke?
hmm the transition was not extremely hard for me personally. I feel like Duke is a college that embraces its international students a lot. There's a program for there's basically an international orientation program in which all the international students get to Duke a few days earlier, I want to say, and just basically have an opportunity to create some international friends before all of the Americans arrive. And there's around, I want to say, like 15%, around 15% of the Duke student body is internationals. So it's not a lot, but it's still a lot. It's still significant, and the internationals here at Duke are a very loud minority. Um, Especially the Latinos, which is the group that I most relate to, and it's a lot of what I was saying. A bunch of the Latinos here at Duke too are super welcoming, super energetic, super extroverted. So it's it was super easy to make friends and just kind of start integrating myself into the US. But a lot of things were kind of hard to swallow in the beginning. It's especially here in Durham, which is the city where Duke is located. It's a much smaller city than São Paulo, and getting used to the small city life was very no, I wouldn't say very hard, but it was definitely not easy. Having to just center all of my life around Duke and just constantly living inside the Duke bubble, so to speak, is very different from my upbringing and what I had in Brazil. Not necessarily a bad thing. I am extremely happy here. I love it, but it's definitely different, and it was definitely a transition. Uh, it was definitely a process.